The most successful people you know aren't more talented than you. They're just delusional in a direction that works. Here's something nobody talks about in the manifestation space. And I mean nobody. Every piece of advice you've ever gotten about self-belief, about confidence, about just trust the process, it's missing the one thing that actually makes it work. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why your self-concept right now is not actually yours. It was written by other people. And I'm going to show you exactly how to rewrite it. Not with affirmations, not with vision boards, but with something so much more precise that it's almost uncomfortable. Stay with me, because around the halfway point, we're going to get into something called the assumptive gap. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your patterns the same way again. Let's start with the word everyone's afraid of, delusion. Most people hear that word and think, crazy, disconnected from reality, dangerous. But here's what's actually true. Every single person walking this earth is operating from a delusion. The only question is yours working for you or against you? The person who stays in a relationship where they're constantly undervalued, that's a delusion, a deep, unconscious belief that says, this is what I deserve. The person who never applies for the job, the promotion, the opportunity, also a delusion, an invisible story that says people like me don't get those things. These aren't choices. These are assumptions so old and so familiar that they feel like facts. If this already landed somewhere in your chest, drop a like so I know this is hitting right. The neuroscience actually backs this up. A study published in Nature Reviews Neuroscience confirms that the brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It doesn't process reality first and then respond. It builds a model of what it expects to see, and then filters everything through that model. What you believe is true shapes what you literally perceive as true. That is not metaphor. That is the architecture of your brain. So when people say, just think positive, they're not wrong, they're just not deep enough. The question isn't about your thoughts. It's about your assumptive baseline, the level of reality your nervous system has decided is normal. Carl Jung talked about the persona, the mask we build early in life to navigate the world safely. And most people spend their entire adult lives living as that mask without ever realizing it isn't them. Think about this. When you were small, you watched the adults around you. You watched how they handled money, whether it was scarce and stressful or something people had access to without drama. You watched how love worked, whether it was warm and steady or something you had to earn. You watched what happened when people took up space. Were they celebrated or cut down? And you made a decision. Not consciously. But your nervous system drew a conclusion. This is how the world works. This is what I am. This is what's available to me. That conclusion became your self-concept. And your self-concept became the lens through which you filter every single experience you have as an adult. This is why you can do all the work. The therapy, the journaling, the meditations, the courses, and still find yourself in the same relationship dynamic, the same financial ceiling, the same loop of self-sabotage. Because you've been trying to change your behavior without touching the operating system underneath it. And here's where it gets really interesting, because I'm going to show you something in a moment that explains exactly why surface-level manifestation techniques don't work for most people. Neville Goddard, one of the most precise thinkers on consciousness who ever lived, said something that people quote but rarely understand at full depth. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Most people take that to mean imagine the thing you want and feel happy about it. But that's not what he meant. He meant live from it, not toward it, from it. Here's the difference. If you're trying to manifest a relationship where you're deeply valued, you can't do that while simultaneously holding the assumption that you have to earn love. Those two things are incompatible at the level of identity. This is what I call the assumptive gap. The distance between the reality you want and the reality your nervous system currently considers normal. And the gap isn't closed by wanting more, it's closed by assuming more. It's closed by acting as if the reality you want is already the baseline, which feels to your current nervous system exactly like delusion. That discomfort you feel when you try to believe something bigger for yourself, that's not a sign you're lying to yourself. That's the gap closing. That's the friction of an old identity resisting an upgrade. Here's a real example. Think about someone who grew up in a household where money was always tight, always stressful, always something to be managed carefully. Now they're 32, they're working hard, and they want financial freedom. They do the budgeting apps, they listen to the finance podcasts, but every time they start getting close to a real breakthrough, something happens. An unexpected expense, a lost client, a decision that pulls them back. Most people call that bad luck. What it actually is a self-concept that doesn't yet include someone who has financial freedom as an identity. And so the nervous system, which is obsessed with consistency, corrects toward familiar every single time. Research in psychology calls this identity-based self-regulation, the idea that people consistently behave in ways that confirm their existing self-concept, even when those behaviors are objectively harmful to them. The brain will choose familiar pain over unfamiliar joy, not because you're broken, because consistency feels like safety. Here's where most people get it backwards. They wait to feel confident before they act from a new identity. But confidence isn't the starting point, it's the result. Radical self-belief, real delusion in the productive sense, means you choose the assumption first. You decide that the version of you who is deeply loved, financially free, and powerfully themselves is not some future destination. It is the current operating truth. And you live from that, even when nothing in your external world confirms it yet. Alan Watts called this the art of playing the game, not fighting reality from a place of lack, but moving through it as if you are already what you're becoming. Not performance, not fake it till you make it, something more precise, being it before the world reflects it back. The reason this works, biologically, is because your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined reality and a lived one. This isn't just motivational content. This is documented in neuroscience. Mental rehearsal activates the same motor and sensory neural pathways as physical experience. Athletes have known this for decades. Your mind is running a simulation. Radical self-belief is just hacking the simulation from the inside. But here's the part that takes this even deeper, and this is the thing I want you to really sit with. The shadow in Jung's framework is everything you've pushed down and denied about yourself. The ambition you were told was arrogance. The desire you were shamed for. The version of you that wanted more and got punished for it. That shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It runs your life from underground. Real radical self-belief isn't about positive thinking. It's about integration, reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried so that your full capacity can come online. You cannot manifest from a fragmented self. You can only manifest from the version of you that has looked at all its parts and said, I claim this, all of it. That is what rewrites reality, not the affirmation, the integration. Take a second and think, what's one version of yourself you buried because someone made you feel like it was too much? Drop it in the comments, not as a therapy exercise, but because naming it out loud is the first act of reclamation. So here's where we land. Delusion isn't the opposite of intelligence. Delusion is the tool. The question is just whether you're wielding it consciously or letting it run you by default. You are already operating from a set of assumptions about who you are and what's available to you. Those assumptions were mostly built before you were old enough to question them. They feel like facts, but they're just old conclusions that nobody ever asked you to update. The work, the real work, is not to want more. It's to assume more, to close the assumptive gap, to let the version of you that is fully whole, fully worthy, and fully powerful become so normal to your nervous system that anything less starts to feel like the lie. That is what Neville meant by living from the end. That is what Jung meant by individuation. That is what Watts was pointing at when he said the self you think you are is already a performance. So why not perform something that sets you free? You were never waiting for the world to change. The world was waiting for your assumption to change. If this video helped you, make sure to like it. And don't forget to subscribe. In the upcoming videos, we'll go deeper into how to actually change your identity across different areas of your life.